So recording is in progress and you are all joining us in Behavioural Science Club. And again, you are all very welcome. And I'm going to kick straight off as you are all signing in. Our guest this week is Julie Guest. And I came across Julie when I was reading about new books published. And I saw Julie's book there, The Client Stampede, and I thought, now that looks really interesting. It looked fun before we'd even started looking at the book. And I put a note up about the book and Julie got back in touch with me. And I'm very pleased that she did, because it's a super book. At the end of the day, we all sell at some stage, whatever our title is at work, we all sell at some stage. And I happen to know that some of our members are in sales. So I'm hoping we'll have questions from you. But when I spoke to Julie, as she said to me, human behavior is at the heart of selling. We have to understand how our customers are behaving, how our potential clients are going to be behaving. And just to give you some background about Julie, because obviously I've become very familiar with her from reading the book and know about her, but she is a best-selling author, a speaker. She's a marketing advisor. In fact, she's CEO of a full-service marketing agency, Bolder and Louder. She's also the founder of the Client Stampede Marketing School and Coaching Company. And I will tell you all now, Julie has a fantastic podcast. If you get fed up with these ones that sometimes wangle on for about 45 minutes, you think, oh, sure, I've had it. Julie's are fantastic. They're to the point, zoom, zoom, zoom. I don't know if this is what you're like in business, Julie. The most recent one, fantastic, where she basically gives out to all the artists in Ann Arbor for just sitting and looking at their customers. So, Julie, we're so pleased you've come to join us. And why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, why this subject interests you so much, and how did you become so dynamic?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you, Louise, for having me meet with your club today. It's great to be here. So I first started in marketing. I actually started my first business in high school. So I started a business selling boxer shorts at a time when everyone was still wearing those like little tighty-whitey men's underpants. And the cut a long story short, the business ended up being so successful that I had to hire 19 more of my classmates just to meet orders and things. And so that was really my first real taste of running a business. And I saw firsthand the power of marketing and sales, because I noticed that, demand would pick up when we did certain things. Like there was some patterns that were more popular than others. Sometimes when we changed the packaging, we would see an immediate increase. When I changed the way that I described our backstory about how we created the boxer shorts, people were suddenly very interested and sales increased. So that was kind of my first, real foray into true in the trenches marketing and sales. And so from there, I actually ended up working as an attorney. I did marketing and business at university, and I also went to law school. But I thought, I think law might be a better fit. Well, it turned out not to be a better fit for me at all. It was far too dry. And I remember in my first year practicing as an attorney, I actually ended up getting the second biggest client for our firm in the history of the firm, just by chatting with them and letting them know what we were doing. And I remember the managing partner that came to me and said, I hate to tell you this, but I don't think that you're a good lawyer, but he said, but you're really great at bringing clients. And it got me thinking, and I realized that it's what I really wanted to do. So I started my first marketing agency, and we work today with a variety of different clients. From we have some Fortune 500 clients, and we have some small to medium-sized business clients as well. So it keeps us on our toes.
That's great, Julie. Now, what I particularly liked about your book at the start was there's a very inclusive feeling to it. You say early on about all the aspects of marketing that people might get involved with, and you're saying about it doesn't matter if it's a big company, it doesn't matter if it's a small company, it doesn't matter if you are one person or one of a large company. So it was a very sort of inclusive approach to the subject and not prescriptive. You know, is this kind of, is that your philosophy, Julie?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the great thing about talking with your club is that you guys understand the immense impact that, psychology has on all of our decision-making abilities. And so I look at what the role of marketing and sales is, and it's basically, it's manipulating people. And, to put it really, really bluntly, it's about getting them to take action, to a certain action that you want them to take. And in order to do that, you have to hit on certain psychological points. And so it doesn't matter whether you are, a solopreneur, who's a consultant working from home, or whether you are running, a Fortune 100 company. And it doesn't matter whether you're selling to other businesses or other, consumers. The way that we all make decisions is hardwired in our DNA and has not changed, has not changed for a very, very long time. But what has changed and what has got so complicated is all the media that come at us, right? And it seems like everyone's like, oh my gosh, we've got to be on TikTok and I've got to be doing this and that and that. And the reality is that those are shiny objects. And that if you take a deep breath and you stand back and you get in place your strategy first, that is the most critical thing that's going to help you get results on whatever marketing platform you advertise on. But everybody now just goes straight to the media and is like, okay, I've got to run ads here, do that, do this, whereas there's no strategy. And so that's why marketing has become so confusing and so difficult.
And in telling the story of sort of how people think of marketing, I really enjoyed your chapter, which talks about debunking myths. And it's got such a strong opening when you talk about something like, you say, oh, there's two percentages, 96% of advertising spend out of all spend is wasted, or something like that. Would you like to just talk about what you think are the marketing myths, Julie?
Sure. I'll have to refer back to my book, but the biggest marketing myth. Well, let me be very methodical about this, and I'll take you through them.
Yeah, the first one is so strong, and you think to yourself, loads of people must think this. You say everyone is not your customer. It's so simple, and yet you feel so many people miss it.
Yes, absolutely. So, one of the challenges that I had was really kind of condensing the myths, because there's, because of the proliferation of digital media, so many forms of marketing now exist. And so there's so many, firmly held beliefs. So in my book, I listed 5 marketing myths. And the first one is that everyone is our customer. And by that, I mean that, many businesses approach, well, if they're willing to pay me, or if they've got money or a credit card, then they must be our customer. And, it's completely counterintuitive, but the more precise and the more micro defined you can make your target market, the far more effective your marketing will be, because you can become an expert to a much smaller pool of people and deeply meet their needs, as opposed to, trying to be all things to all people. And that results in a very generic, very boring marketing message. So that's the first myth. The second myth was that digital advertising rules. And I love digital advertising. We use it, it's our bread and butter. But the reality is that most people now are so completely burnt out of digital ads. It's become harder and harder to get attention. We've become so brilliant at, dodging digital ads online, on television, on all of our different media. And so, all of our marketing that we create for our clients includes a very strong component of what we call humanized marketing, which is really creating, really great experiences. We use direct mail a lot. we do things that other marketing agencies just simply don't do and won't do. And the results just from doing one of those things dwarfs some of the best digital marketing campaigns, because no one takes the time to do this anymore. And so, you know, the real secret of marketing is to do, when everyone's going in one direction, it's to look at the opportunities in the other direction, because then it suddenly becomes much more a strategic decision as opposed to just trying to shout louder to be heard.
Thank you, Julie. And you were mentioning earlier about the proliferation of different ways in which we can try to reach out to our clients. And again, that's a super section of the book where you talk about your client attraction tools. And I loved the way, in a way, it was like there's the brief chat about each of them. And so you can, because it can be very overwhelming, can't it? You think, oh, if I'm not contacting this way, if I'm not contacting that way, who am I going to miss?
Yeah. And one of the most powerful strategies that we have used and been able to use is basically for any business to create what I call a marketing engine. And so what that basically does is it takes away that sort of throwing mud at a wall type approach, where you're just you're just frenetically trying all these different things, hoping that something will work. And this is about basically building a system that can attract, convert, and retain clients. And you do that using a whole lot of different media. And my book is just about really creating each of those individual pieces and following the strategy that goes into that.
So we've got salespeople I know who have joined us, because I've just seen one of our members, Tony Navarro. So I'm really hoping he's going to have a super question for you, Julie. But before we move on to members' questions, I'd like to particularly talk about the podcast, that episode that I mentioned in the introduction, about your visit out to Ann Arbor. And it's quite a quick story. So maybe, Julie, you could just sort of paraphrase it for the members so they can hear what your observations were when you went out the other day.
Sure. So so in Ann Arbor in Michigan, there's a very, very famous art fair that's held every year, and typically attracts artists from all over the country and sometimes all over the world. And basically they close down downtown area, and it just becomes like this giant art gallery of tents with individual artists, you know, bringing their amazing pieces to be sold. And so I went there with some friends, and you know, unfortunately, it was extremely hot. Like, it was one of the hottest days of the year. And it was one of those days that you could almost fry an egg on the pavement. It was so hot. So most people were staying at home. And as a result, you know, these poor artists that had stayed or spent all this money to come to Ann Arbor, you know, many of them were making the majority of their year's salary or earnings just by coming to this fair. You know, it was like a ghost town, usually, where there'd be thousands and thousands of people. And there were, you know, as we would walk, we would occasionally see a small group of people here and there. Anyway, I always think it's interesting because there seems to be a certain sort of moral expectation that artists have to be starving, right? And if you're not starving for your art, then you can't be a real artist. And first of all, it's total garbage. But I saw the reason why these artists were starving, and it had nothing to do with the fact that it was a really hot day and there was no foot traffic or people to buy their pieces of art. It was because every time that we went into a tent, you know, all the artists, instead of engaging with us, you know, as people who were very eager to purchase something, they were all completely removed. They didn't connect at all. They didn't talk to us. They didn't have any marketing collateral. They didn't run, you know, an email campaign before or after, or a social media campaign before or after to give us like previews or follow-ups. They did absolutely nothing. They just sort of sat there. And so that was what my podcast was about, like why artists are starving. You know, this is why. And I have two friends who are now, they used to be starving, but now they are extremely successful, internationally renowned artists, and their art has not changed. It's not because they suddenly got better at what they've done. It's because their marketing, they really understood what the role of marketing was in their business.
It really is at the heart of everything, isn't it? In that particular way in which you were out that day and you observed and then had this, flash of inspiration as to what they were not doing. Do you find yourself, Julie, doing that, where you're observing either shops that you think are badly marketing themselves or something you might read in a newspaper or a magazine?
Yes, I think it's the way that my brain is wired. I don't know if you remember, Louise, where I talk about going to church, like a new church that some friends of ours had invited me to because their son was playing in a band. And, every experience, I'm always looking at it through a marketing lens, which can be both a good thing and and a highly challenging thing. But, marketing, all of us are marketing and selling in some way. And particularly now, we've got the rise of a personal brand. So whether you are employed by someone or whether you are an entrepreneur or business owner, we all have to market ourselves, basically as a brand in a sense. So even if you're not a business owner, you are still, you're still putting your best foot forward as an employee, and you've got a career path that you're wanting to basically go down. And the way that you can get to your dream job is not that dissimilar to business owners getting to their the size that they want.
And nobody would argue that psychology isn't at the very base of marketing. But with the rise, as it were, over the recent years in behavioural science and opening of so many more behavioural science specific consulting labs, our guest last week was saying so many companies now are either sort of rebranding an existing role and calling them the behavioural science specialist, or are recruiting behavioural scientists into their particular area of industry. And I just wondered if you've sort of seen this development at all, both in companies that are either your clients or other marketing companies that you would know about.
Absolutely. I think there's a huge growth and an awareness of the importance, possibly for the first time, of the importance of psychology and really being able to influence buyer behavior in so many different touch points. Like, it just used to be, you would do it through an advertisement, but now it is about creating what they call omnimedia experiences. And so it's every single prospect and customer touch point. And so I've definitely seen an increase in emphasis, particularly from the large companies, for wanting to get to the data and getting to the science behind why people are doing what they're doing. And I think that the kind of marketing that we do is direct response marketing, which is also known as scientific marketing, because it is so response based. And I am so happy that this is the direction that we are seeing our industry kind of move towards, because instead of it just being sort of like a fluffy, it looks great, but it's not actually getting anyone to do anything, it's really all about the results. And so I can think of 3 clients off the top of my head that have, just as you mentioned before, either created brand new departments, or they have really elevated that role of a psychological expert to come in and really kind of dig into that data.
And what interested me as well about our guest last week was he was saying about the way in which it's being incorporated so much into market research. And obviously, you see results in sales because your sales increase. But what sort of role does market research play for you, Julie, in your company, if at all?
Oh, it's huge. Because you cannot even begin to create any kind of strategy and then marketing or advertising campaign until you've got just incredible data about the target market. So as an example, my team, if we are creating a whole new campaign for a client, or let's say it's a brand new client and we've never worked with them before, and we don't know much about who their current not only who their current customers are, but who, like, where the big opportunities are, at least half of my team's time is spent with the market research team going through analyzing trends, because what those trends can reveal is gold, and it can ensure that a company, instead of taking 2 to 5 years to reach their goal, they can get there in 1 to 2 years. So it's really powerful.
And are you seeing any changes in that particular area where agencies are recognizing so much more that they need to focus on behavior rather than asking the customers directly?
You know what, I think that my industry is so, there's so much smoke and mirrors that happen in marketing. And I think that there are, I would say the top 5% in my industry take a very science-based approach to creating marketing and advertising and strategy, and really making sure there's that really solid foundation there. I would say at a guess, 80% have no clue and have no desire to change anything. They just kind of want to, I call it, rack them and stack them. And then there's that sort of gray, remaining number that are somewhat aware of it, but they are not sure about how to actually implement that. So, but the awareness is growing substantially because it's become evident that the old model is working less and less.
Yeah, that's so interesting you say that, Julie, because it seems to be a conversation I have more and more often, which is that because you're in such a small circle of people, you just presume that everybody else knows what you know or has read what you know, because you're talking with those people all the time. And then when you just slightly step outside that window of speciality, the knowledge in the area is often much less than you anticipate it to be. So before I go to our members to ask them for their questions, for you, Julie, I can't move on without commenting on the beautiful photo behind you, which I know is a huge interest of yours as well, Julie. So let's just deviate from marketing for the moment and talk about your love of horses.
Yep. So we have five horses and 4 dogs. So we have lots of animals. But yeah, I was one of those kids that never grew up with horses. I loved horses, but we lived in the suburbs in the city, in New Zealand at the time. And so I got my first horse as an adult. But I've been lucky enough that, I have my daughter is now 11, and I bought her first pony when she was 5. So I've been able to have my second childhood through her pony. So yeah, horses are a huge part of our lives. It's been a great gift.
I've just seen one of the comments in the chat from Nirja, and Nirja has mentioned Simon Sinek, and that's just made me think as well, before I move to the questions, are there any people sort of in the field of this subject that you particularly admire, or that you like to read, or a particular good book that you think would be helpful for anybody who is working in this area?
Yes. Oh my gosh, I have many resources, but one of my favorite authors of all time is Cialdini, who I mean, you could pick up any of his books, but he really, to me, his analysis of why people do what they do, I think is brilliant. And for me as a marketer, it has such a solid basis. I remember he talks in one of his books about the Hare Krishnas, which, in New Zealand, there was a group of Hare Krishnas, and in the city that I grew up, and I used to remember as a child going into town on a Friday evening, and the Hare Krishnas would be there, and they would always give us like a rose. And it was Cialdini's principle of reciprocity, right? So that they give you a rose, you accept the rose, and then you immediately feel like you need to stand there and thank them or listen to what it is that they have to say. And it was brilliant. It was non-confrontational, and it enabled the conversation to open up. So Cialdini is someone who I admire greatly. Michael Gerber is another thought leader in this area that I think has a great deal of value to add. Another one of my favorite books is the book Sway. Brilliant on so many levels. So those would probably be my top 3 favorite resources off the top of my head.
Thanks, Julie. You're all fans of Cialdini here. So I'm going to go over to the members now, and this isn't so much a question, but I would like Kathleen to join us to maybe use Kathleen as a prompt to get you to tell us one of your other stories. Julie, would you like to join us, Kathleen?
Sure. Hi. When I heard you were going to be the guest and I saw, oh, you have a podcast. So I basically listened to it while I was doing yard work, and it really helped move things along. And they are short. If you haven't listened to her podcast, they're like average 4 to 5 minutes each one of them. And she does have pretty much a story in every one. But the one that resonated with me the most was because I kind of lived through the same thing. I was living in Arizona, where Nevada and Arizona had the housing crunch first, and then California. And I just found it really fascinating how you sold your upside down mortgage house and the technique that you used. And maybe you would like to tell the other people, because I thought it was really clever.
Sure. Thank you, Kathleen. So that was kind of the start of the formula I call it the client Stampede formula, was my experience, being backed into the wall, where I had purchased a house in Los Angeles. It was on a postage size piece of ground. I had bought it at the top of the market, right before I think the bottom fell out of the market, just a couple of months after I had purchased it. The house was nondescript. It was a small ranch house. Neighbors could see in on 3 sides. It had a swimming pool at the back, but it was a very average kind of home. I think we purchased it for $640,000, and I had maximized the mortgage that I could possibly get on it. So I think I had got like a 95% mortgage. Anyway, the market fell out. The bottom fell out of the market, and in Los Angeles at that time, in our neighborhood and all the surrounding neighborhoods, properties were losing value, $10,000 a week, $20,000 a week. It was just a bloodbath. And I remember speaking to some agents at the time, and they were saying, if they could get 1 or 2 groups through an open house during this housing crisis, they considered it like a huge achievement. And my husband at the time got a transfer to Arizona, and so we had to sell our house. And it became very, very evident that not only were we underwater, but we were underwater to the tune of the house had dropped in value so much that the agents that I had spoken to were of the belief that it would only sell for, maybe in the low 400,000s, which would mean that if we were to sell it, that we would have to write a check for 200,000 plus in order to sell it. And I didn't want to give it back to the bank. That wasn't how I was raised, and I really wanted to ensure that I had given everything that I had. And so I realized that I had to create a marketing campaign, an advertising campaign that would be so different and attract attention and would hopefully attract the right kind of buyer. And so that's basically the client Stampede formula. And so what I did is I changed the entire buying experience. So I ran an ad campaign that launched on a Monday, and the goal was that we would try and drive as many people to an open house through the house on Saturday and Sunday. And on Sunday, I was going to sell it to the highest bidder, because I figured if I could get enough people through the house, again, human behavior and psychology is that we just can't let someone else get a better deal. And so providing I could get enough people through the house, I knew that it would sell for full market value, whatever that would be. But I was confident that I would be able to, I should say cautiously confident, that I would be able to hopefully come close to breaking even. I thought at the very, hopefully if I only had to pay $20,000 or $50,000, then that would be a lot better than what the other alternative was. And so that's what I did. I created this very intensive marketing campaign, launched on the Monday, and basically all hell broke loose. We had people knocking on the window, knocking on the windows, the phone rang off the hook. People wanted to get early access to the house, which we wouldn't let them, because the whole point is that you have to create enough of a crowd and enough interest that everyone else can see the other interested parties, because that just kind of, that's what creates the experience. So the end result was that by the Sunday evening, we had well over 200 people through the home. We ended up with about 20 interested parties that had placed an offer. And of that, I was able to sell it to the highest bidder, which ended up being just a few thousand more than what we owed. So it was a huge relief. I remember that the same real estate agents that I had spoken to knocked on their door and wanted to come and see what we were doing. And, they were like, oh, you're doing something illegal. How dare you do this? Because, I'd shown them a whole new model of doing things that was so out of their box. They were so uncomfortable. And then the following day, another real estate agent came and said, oh my God, please, can you create the marketing for our brokerage and show us how you're doing what you're doing? So it was a really interesting experience. And what was most interesting to me, and possibly to you guys from a psychology perspective, is that the family who ended up buying the house were not even looking necessarily to buy the house. They lived a few blocks down. They had seen our marketing campaigns and they were like, this looks interesting. Like, what on earth are these people doing? And they came by and they saw the crowd of people and they came in, and as they walked through the house, they fell in love with it and they ended up buying it for their daughter. And so to me, this was like one of those watershed kind of moments where I realized that great marketing creates its own demand. And as long as you can get enough numbers and enough eyeballs, to a campaign, as long as it's qualified traffic, then you really can be in control of that. And it was so freeing to me to understand that. And that's what I've been, that's through my podcast, when I'm teaching. My goal is to teach that to any other small business owner anywhere, is that you don't have to be victim to any outside circumstances, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's a change in the economy, whether it's a recession. None of that matters at all. There are always buyers. And so it's about being able to really resonate and connect with them. Does that answer your question, Kathleen?
I really appreciate you doing the whole thing again. She basically redid her whole podcast for you guys. And yes, it was perfect.
Thanks for that prompt, Kathleen, because it is a super story. And I love the way you told it, Julie, because it sounds so very empowering. Now, Nuala has mentioned, in fact, that Chaldine is going to be the guest speaker at Gabs on Tuesday at 4:00. So we'll ask Nuala to put a link to that event in the group thread for Behavioural Science Club. I'm sure lots of you would like to attend that. He's a great speaker, there's no doubt about it. We have a question now from Nirja. Would you like to join us, Nirja?
Of course. Thank you,
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Yeah.
Perfectly, Nirja. Would you like to put your question to Julie?
Yeah. Hi, Julie. And it was so inspiring to hear your story and all the work that you've done. And I love the picture of horses, and just, it just embodies a lot of resilience and kind of yet moving around. So I just loved whatever you said. And I'm really, really happy that I'm in this conversation with you today. So, combining the two aspects of marketing and also behavioral science, that what I was really curious to know was that, every person is different, and every person has different behavioral traits. And if you look at marketing as a craft, the first thing that we do in marketing is to segment people, based on age, gender, different things, right? So when it comes to segmenting people on behavioral aspects, how do you do that, and how easy it is to do that, and what are the best practices that you follow doing that?
So that is a great question. So the first step always, so the first step always is to look at a specific target market, right? So let's say, I'm not sure, like if we pick a product, let's just say it's widgets, whatever. So you've got widgets to sell, and you created the widgets because you saw a gap in the market, because basically, let's say, I don't know, let's say the widgets help stay-at-home moms to, do something more efficiently, as an example, right? So the first thing that you've got to do is really drill down into the stay-at-home moms, because stay-at-home moms can be so completely different. And within that target market, there's thousands of micro segments. And so what I would be doing is I would want to know in the past who, first of all, I start with like what I call the low-hanging fruit. So I would want to know, where has a company had success before? So, when these widgets have been sold, who have been the buyers, and what has been the great feedback from them? What have they loved about it the most? And what I would look to do then is I would look to replicate basically that buyer profile by going into a target market and seeing, where were they geographically located? What were their ages? How old were their children? What ethnicities were they? What kind of religious background do they have? What buying habits do they have? But one of the most important questions to ask, which, to go back to your thing about best practices, is I want to know who else they are buying from, right? Because in marketing, basically a buyer is a buyer. And if somebody is purchasing something from another, like a competitor, it means that they're actively looking for the solution that you are providing. And so it just means that, to me, that is it's a really powerful question to ask. And instead of you like being lost in a whole target market and, we could go after these people or those people, you want to look at who already is buying this or has an interest in purchasing this, and then how can we resonate with them? And so there's typically, our team have a list of about 25 to 30 questions that we have to be able to answer in minute detail, and really understand about that specific target market buyer before we can even go and create a campaign. Because the more closely you understand them and their pain, the more that you can speak to them as a person. And like, for me, I know that our marketing has really hit home when I hear a buyer say, "Oh my gosh, it felt like you were speaking to me," right? Like that is the goal. It's that we're sitting here having a conversation. I'm not selling you anything. We're talking about what problems or what pain you've got, and potentially here's a solution. And you're like, "Oh, okay, that would be great." And as long, and this is a big piece, as long as you're really ethical about what it is that you are advocating and that it truly makes life better for them, then like that's the secret. And your question is a great one, because my daughter also asked me a similar question where she said, is what you're doing manipulating people, Mom? Because I was explaining, how to write advertisements and how certain words make people feel certain ways. And so I said, yes. In a sense, it is about manipulating people, but it's to improve their lives, right? So as an example, our agency will not and has refused big contracts from anyone selling pornography, from tobacco companies, gambling industry, right? Like, that's the way that I've chosen to run my industry. I will only help market products and services that I 1000% believe in, because otherwise I feel that's an abuse of power. So I know that was kind of a slight tangent from your question, but does that answer?
No,
does that answer
it did. It did. It actually answered my second question as well, because, how does your research team does that? And now I have a very small question. It's probably just something that I want to understand, because I work in product management, and there is a part of go-to-market that I do. I mean, I'm not fully involved in marketing, but I, often influence a lot of marketing decisions. So is marketing a skill that you can learn? Or is it something that you're naturally, innately born with? Like with you and the law firm, right? You got the feedback that, you're better at connecting with people. So is this something that you can learn, or it's just something that you're born with and you get better at it?
Yeah. So that is again, another brilliant question. So it is absolutely a skill that you can learn. And my natural ability is more from a strategic perspective. Like I can look at a business and I call it finding the money trail. Like I can see what things they need to do to get to their goals. It's just the way that my brain has been wired. But marketing is a skill. It's almost like a prescription that you follow, because and that's what I talk about in my book. It's just 7 steps. And if you follow that prescription, anybody can do it, which is, I think it's just like marketing is truly the great enabler, because now again, you are in charge of your future and your income and your own opportunities. You don't have to worry about having these outside influences come and rob you of money. So yeah, it's probably the most valuable skill a business owner can have. Even if you don't do it yourself, just having that understanding is critical, because that will help you understand what is great marketing and what is a total, the 95% waste of money marketing.
Thank you. Appreciate that answer, Julie. And it was amazing to talk to you. And thank you, Louise, for giving me the opportunity.
My pleasure. Thanks, Neerja. They were really great questions. And it just made me think about how customer profiling is so important at the outset when you're doing your qualitative work and you're talking to the different groups of people. We'd often have various different profiles of people we're trying to recruit. And it's so important to get that right at that stage. So that was a really interesting question. Subroto has a question. Subroto Mukherjee, if you'd like to join us. I'm not sure, I'm not familiar with the term you're using, humanized marketing, but if you'd like to put your question to Julie, please.
Yeah, I think this is something I learned from Julie. She was mentioning about this term, humanized marketing, and then so I'm just reusing the same word, and then omni-media experience, response-based marketing. So I'm just kind of collaborating them together and saying, hey, Julie, for this kind of marketing, which is obviously we are looking at different dimensions here, how does the cost factor come into play, considering a lot of big money we are putting into marketing campaigns and all? Is that a more nimble cost, or you're like looking at a similar cost? And how do you attribute this marketing? Because now attribution is becoming a very key aspect of it, right? From an ROI perspective. What's your take on that, and how do you kind of manage that currently?
Okay, so you've asked me a lot of questions, Subroto, so hopefully I can answer them all. So the first step is, I talk about the importance of building a marketing engine, right? Which is before you even are launching a campaign, it's about ensuring that you've got rock solid strategy, right? And that's ensuring that you are using, it's basically the 7 steps of the client Stampede formula. But to just give you a quick recap, it's ensuring that you are laser focused on the right target market. It ensures that you have a really, really powerful, irresistible core message that's going to resonate with that target market. The third thing is that your branding has to be really, not just from a design perspective, look really fresh and enticing and modern, but it has to really capture the essence of what it is that you are doing to help your buyers, how their lives will be better by purchasing or investing in your products or services. Then the fourth step is creating basically a pricing structure that enables them to take one step with your company, potentially make a small purchase and test the water. And if that's great, then they move up, and that's called a sales ascension ladder. And then on top of that, it's great to have luxury products that are very, very high priced, because in any market, there's always at least 5% that want the best. That's been my experience the whole time I've been doing marketing. So that's a whole nother chat that we could have. And it's only once you've got those pieces in place that you're ready to then design the marketing campaigns, right? So going back to your question about omni-media, humanizing the experience, direct response marketing, all of those things come into play, because by humanizing your marketing, I'm basically saying it's about, instead of me taking a message and just pushing it out there and hoping that it resonates with someone, it's about creating a message that is so personal to you that you and I feel like we're having a chat, and I really understand what you're going through and how this can work. And so that's a very, very different psychological perspective to approach a marketing campaign from. First and foremost, omni-media simply means using every different avenue of a customer journey, from starting as a prospect, where you may have heard about a specific product or service, what does it look like when I come and visit your website, when I use your chat, how is that experience? When I actually pick up the phone and speak to your customer service people, how do they treat me? Are they answering my questions? Then I might physically go in and make an appointment, or, like, what does your waiting room look like? Or, how does the doctor speak to me? So it's all of those things that come into play, in addition to the different layers of media that you might have used, that I might have touched on. So maybe you sent me an email, maybe I saw, a story on Instagram, or whatever that is. So Omnimedia is I think of it as like a 360 experience for people. And that's where we are moving to, and as an industry and as a trend, because it used to be that target markets were kind of, you would broadly define a target market, and then companies would just throw everything at that target market. And now it is about, we have to be far more sophisticated in order to really connect with people and get them to buy, because you've got to provide what is known as like hyper individualized experiences. And so that's why, going back to the market research, that's why that is so critically important to get right. Okay, so I'm just going to fast forward a little bit and talk about ROI, which was a great question that you brought up, and how does that come into play with what we're doing? So when you're creating a marketing engine, and when you're running campaigns, unless you are a brand new startup, you would typically always have what's called a control, right? Which means the number one advertisement or campaign that you've used in the past that is responsible for bringing in, it might have the greatest response rate. And so the goal when you are building a marketing engine is that you are always measuring results against that control, because the goal is to replace the control, and basically keep improving it. And that level of incremental improvement is where like the true exponential results come from. And so once you actually get to being able to equal or better the control, which usually is quite simple to do, because most companies don't have great marketing, then it doesn't become a question of marketing budget at all, because for every dollar, let me ask you a question. If you gave me $1 and I gave you $2 back for every dollar that you gave me, how much money would you give me?
I think I'll keep on doing the same thing going forward.
Nah, man, excellent. You'd give me all your money, right? Because I would be doubling it. And that's what great marketing does, because it truly becomes an investment that becomes, where you get real returns on. And as part of that, if we're going to talk about marketing budget allocation, so you're going to put a huge amount of emphasis of resources into that to get your ROI to increase, but you're also going to grab some of that marketing budget, a small amount, and you're going to use it to really innovate and keep innovating and keep finding that next frontier, because you never want to be resting on your laurels. And so that's the methodology that we use when we create a marketing engine. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it was good. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Spirito. Great questions there now.
Just one thing is that I hope you did not get that Bitcoin offers, because nowadays people are buying houses on Bitcoin. So.
That's been happening for a while, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Spirito. So next, I'd like to bring in Tony, if you're still with us.
Yes, I am still with you.
Hi, Tony. You're very welcome.
A slight emergency. So, Julie, this is great. I'm loving this conversation, by the way. I love somebody who's into marketing and sales. Now, I've mostly worked for small businesses. So, even usually no more than 20 people in the whole company. And my gosh, getting buy-in for a marketing system, a marketing campaign, much less a marketing system, it was extremely difficult for me. I don't know why. I would propose things and everybody go, that's great, and then nothing would happen. Finally, I even just paid to do my own marketing because I wanted customers to come in asking for me. And so it's really, is there things that an individual salesperson or somebody who's interested in boosting maybe their personal bottom line in addition to the company's bottom line, something that they can do without a lot of buy-in from management?
So great question. And the whole political makeup of, you know, specifically small
Yes.
businesses, I mean, it's a political minefield, right? So
Yes.
The first thing that I would say in regards to that is, in order to get them buy-in, the way that I would approach it is I would show them the cost, the real cost that is their current marketing is costing them. So the cost of lost opportunity, right? So it's like, you know, you've got, here's what we're currently doing, and here's the size of the market, and here's what our competitors are doing, and here's all the things that we are not doing that we could be doing, and this is money that is not here because we are not taking these actions. Right. And then you've got to get them to switch their thinking. They're just thinking like this, and you've got to completely change the way that they think about not just marketing, but about the future of the company and its, you know, innovation and that kind of thing. So that would be the first thing that I would say. The second thing, were you in sales? Is that what you were working for this?
Yeah, I'm a
business?
salesperson. Yeah, I do primarily
perfect.
sales, mostly face-to-face.
Yep. Perfect. I love working with salespeople because they so get it. So if I was employed as a salesperson, what I would do is I would create basically my own lead generation system, so that I would be looking to replicate myself as much as possible. And I would be creating, like, I would use books, I would use free reports, I would do things that would basically talk to my individual buyers and give them a solution to the problem that they're suffering from. So I don't know what your business was, but if you can get their attention by giving them an answer to a question that is keeping them up at night, you're gold. And presumably whatever the thing was that you're providing them with is somehow fits onto that continuum. Would that be right?
That's correct. Yes, outdoor, mostly high-end outdoor furniture and fireplaces. You're in Los Angeles, Julie? So
no, I'm in New York.
You're in New York. Okay, well, when you lived in Los Angeles, when you had some room, actually, you may have heard of the brands Brown Jordan or Summer Classics or Lloyd Flanders. You know, that type of furniture, Didon.
Yep. So in that case, what I would actually do is I would create, I would do my own direct mail campaigns and mail specifically like whoever the buyer profile fits of past buyers. And I would build a relationship with those people. I remember hearing this amazing story back in the 70s about a car salesman, and he was the #1 salesman in America for the simple reason
Joe
that every
Girard.
single person, you got it, you know it.
Oh yeah, read lots of books.
Did, right?
Yeah, he said.
I have a feeling that salespeople have a list of glossary items that only they understand, and they quickly react to each other.
It's true. It's a secret language, Nirja. And we just go, oh yeah, right.
But I mean, that's another great example of how you've got to know your target market so well, because every single target market uses a special kind of language, right? So if I'm looking to help Tony with something, I want to be able to speak his language, and so that we can connect, right? We just had a connection there because we both understood this very salient point, and we're like, oh, okay, that's like a huge piece of common ground. So if you extrapolate that to a marketing perspective, like that's what's missing from most marketing today, is that level of understanding and connection, and that's what you guys can bring to the table. Right. So to get back,
oh no, I just flashed on a different question that somebody else had asked about how to create rapport quickly and easily with customers, and what you said, Julie, is the way to do it. Common ground.
Yep, exactly. So yeah, there's so many things that you could do, whether it be with lost buyers, people that have bought and then haven't bought for like a year or two, however you would define a lost buyer, with really deepening the relationship with people that you have an existing relation, you know, your existing buyers, and getting them to bring more people into the fold. And then, you know, one of a really cool strategy that you could have used is to do like neighborhood campaigns, when as soon as you have somebody that's purchased, furniture with their permission, is say, this house or these people have purchased this. It's the most incredible piece here. It's been featured in Architectural Digest and And by the way, we have, we've got a special happening, or whatever that special might have been. Like, there's ways that you can create really creatively to pull them in and make them go, oh, wow, they're already doing that. Some of those neighborhood campaigns can be so powerful when they're done in the right way. And obviously luxury furniture requires a different strategy from, regular level furniture, but the same principles apply.
Thank you so much, Julie. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tony. And thank you, Tony, for joining us again. So we're coming close to the end of today's session. As Tony just mentioned there, Madhav had a question about the quickest way to be relatable. And I think you covered that very well in the end of that particular example that you gave, Julie. So before we wrap up today, I am going to thank Julie, but I would like you to all stay on the call, because I'm going to ask Prakash to join us so that he can just whip up your enthusiasm for his upcoming Now Fest and tease your interest with maybe telling us a few of the people who are going to be joining us. So it just remains for me to thank Julie so much for joining us today. It's been a really interesting conversation. You must listen to her podcast, The Client Stampede. If you're interested in marketing, you will love her book, The Client Stampede. And so thank you very much indeed, Julie. It's been lovely to have you with us today. And as I said, I'd just like to bring Prakash to the group to tell us about his Now Fest.
Thank you so much, Louise. It's been a pleasure being here. You guys are so much fun to talk to. I love talking about the psychology. So thank you, everyone. It's been a great way to spend my Saturday morning with you all.
Thanks, Julie.